Good morning and welcome to the Orlando Sentinel's interview with Democratic candidates for Orange County Supervisor of Elections, a race to be the elected successor to one of the nation's longest-serving elections officials, Bill Cowles. We have 4 candidates with us today. Castor Dentel, a former state legislator who was a member of the Orange County School Board. Wes Hodge, former chair of the Orange County Democratic Party. Dan Helm, an attorney who served as the Deputy Regional Director for Voter Protection in Central Florida for the Democratic Party. And Sunshine Grund, a real estate broker with a history of community activism. The status of this race is in limbo right now. Just days before the August 20th primary, there will be a trial over whether a 5th candidate in the race, Cynthia Harris, is qualified to be on the ballot. If she is removed, there is a possibility that this primary will be shifted to the November general election. Keep a close eye on our coverage to stay up to date on the status of this race. But now we're going to start with our questions. And I wanted to start with the fact that since Mr. Cowles abruptly retired this year, the office has been under the interim supervision of Glenn Gilzine, who was appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis. If you could briefly assess his performance in that interim role, and we will start with Mr. Helm.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak and interview with you today. If we're talking about Glenn Gilzine, I think what I would say is that he doesn't have the experience that is needed for the office, right? So he was appointed after receiving a call from the governor for a job that he did not apply for a job that he continued to work as a consultant for another job, right? As the Sentinel has reported and found out that he is working 2 jobs. So when I go to the office, I don't often see Glenn there. It used to be when under Bill Cowles, you could go to the office, you could look straight through the glass and see that Bill was in office working. I don't always see Glenn Gilzine in the office. And so I don't think he has the experience. I will say that he has done some things that I find commendable, including revitalize the social media page, right? So that's something that has been missing. It's an easy lift to get information to the voters. That's something that is commendable. I think he also has a creative idea about making the ballot opening process for vote-by-mail ballots accessible for online transparency. So he's done some things that I think are commendable. But on the other hand, he doesn't have the experience that the office requires and needed. And that you're seeing that most evidently when I look at my lawsuit that I had to file, because he did not properly, a person that is on the ballot that did not qualify properly. And that's a lack of experience. Bill Cowles would have caught that mistake, helped Cynthia qualify properly. But right now we have an instance where somebody's on the ballot that shouldn't be on the ballot. And so I had to file a lawsuit to protect the integrity of the ballot. Right now in our country, the integrity of the ballot is under attack. There's a lot of misinformation, a lot of voter intimidation, voter suppression that is occurring because the election process is under attack. In some ways, with acts of violence, attack on the U.S. Capitol was a attack with violence to disrupt an election process. So we need somebody in that office that has the knowledge and the experience to protect that office, and I'm Dan Helm for that position.
All right, Dr. Dentel.
All right. So you've asked us to assess the current supervisor's role, and I would say it's mixed. I would definitely say that experience is a quality that is needed in this role. So how do you get that experience when the current or the previous supervisor was in the position for 30 years? I have experience with decades of elections experience. I have experience with serving in the legislature, where after one of my races, we had, I noticed at the Winter Park Library, it was used as an early voting site, but the library in Eatonville wasn't. And when I met with the supervisor, Cowles, and discussed it, he explained why that decision was made, because the library was small, the parking lot was small. So he said, what you need is a change in the statute. So that was the first bill I filed when I was in the legislature, to allow for municipal buildings to be used, which is what Glenn Gilzine has used to expand the early voting sites. And he has one at West Lakes, and he has one at the town hall in Eatonville, which I think that was a great addition to our early voting sites. There are some other issues, like with no bid contracts and hiring friends and people who were in his wedding, that are a concern, which is why I offered a code of ethics to be placed in the office, just for the supervisor and for staff, and for our way to review contracts and put them out for competitive bid. Again, it's a mixed performance so far. I mean, we don't know if there are issues with being understaffed or if it's a budget issue, but there's definitely some errors that are happening within the office right now.
Thank you. Ms. Grund.
Hi, yes, thank you. I am thankful for Mr. Gilzine and his willingness to step up to this role. He has some pretty big shoes to fill. As we all know, Bill Cowles did an amazing job as he served as our supervisor of elections. Some of the things that I do think that he has done well is he has tried to really promote voter turnout or voter information, getting out the vote. He has, like Dan mentioned, a very much of a stronger social media presence. And I think that's important to the voters so that they have the information and access to it on where to go and what to do. He also, I don't know if I mentioned the souls of the polls. I think he's really trying to get the community and getting the leaders, the ones out there, telling the citizens that there's an election coming on. And of course, sorry about the noise. I guess the lawn people decided to come as we have our interview today. I believe, like Dan, the integrity of our elections is important. And so I do think that he could have done a better job at the policies and procedures and making sure that the staff understood what the rules are regarding the qualification, because that would have solved the issue before it got presented in lawsuit. So I do think we have to keep in mind we're one person, but we also have to make sure that our team is strong. We're the supervisors. We have staff that are doing the day-to-day operations. We need to understand that. We need to support them, and we need to look at, as you had mentioned, Karen, assessing our staffing model. And where is that, and where's the money being spent, and do we need to transfer some funds to their department to get them maybe some continuing education or best practices in the field, because that's what makes us strong as the election office. And I do also have appreciated the transparency of opening the vote by mail. I think that gives the voters the confidence of our office. So I would continue with that direction as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Hodge.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to the Sentinel for hosting us today. I would agree that it's a mixed review. I'll start with the positive. I've been very impressed with the community engagement that has been going on, and I've told Glenn as much when I've seen him at events, because we need to have more community engagement and partners. I also am happy to see the expansion of early voting. I'd already been in conversations with Mayor Gardner in Eatonville and with the Westlake partnership to have those two locations as early voting sites. And I've promised to get a commitment not only for this presidential cycle, but for the governor elections and municipal elections to keep those sites open, because they're essential for getting more voter participation. But on the bad side, there's a lot of lack of knowledge there. And during qualifying, I had 16 different candidates or elected officials come to me and ask about qualification process, and like, Wes, can you help me with these qualifications? I'm not sure exactly what's going on. And that's because they know that he doesn't know the qualifying process. And so they came to me because they trusted me. This is one of the most important things as an elected person or a candidate that you do. And they know that I had the institutional knowledge and background to answer those questions. We saw something as simple as the wrong deadline for vote by mail being put out on social media, and it sat there for 2 days until we corrected them and said, hey, you don't even have the right information out. And then one of the other things that really concerned me is his budget. He had this $1 million add-on budget request that lacked any specificity. I'm the only person that went to the county and spoke on the SOE budget and demanded more transparency and accountability, because the taxpayers deserve to know where that money is going, and we need to be sure that our dollars are being taken care of in a good, positive way. And like was earlier mentioned, these no-bid contracts for legal representation are very concerning to me. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up with a similar and related question, sort of about how we've looked at Gilzine looking back and hoping to look forward. A lot of Floridians have a crisis of confidence in election integrity. Things have happened that have caused some confidence issues there. What additional measures should Orange County take to prove to residents that their ballots are safe and secure? Do you think we're in a good place on that? And if elected, what would you do in addition to the fail-safes that are in place? And let's start back with Mr. Hodge.
All right, thanks for that question. So I feel like we're in a really good place. One of the last things that Supervisor Cowles did was purchase all new voting equipment. So we have the latest technology and security from that aspect. So we're in a good place from the voting tabulation machines. I do like what Mr. Gilzine has started with the live streaming for the mail ballots. However, I want to see additional protections where we box out the identification of the poll workers, because as we've seen around the country, our elections workers are doxxed and harassed, and that's not necessary. If we can take further protections for them, I'm all for it, but I believe in that transparency. I worked with the county for almost 2 years, and in that time, I got to know a lot of the staff. Mike Seif is the director of Orange TV, and he and I have already made a commitment when the canvassing board meets, and that's when the actual votes are counted, so to speak. I want that broadcast live on Orange TV. The canvassing board is the supervisor of elections, a county judge, and a county commissioner. And that process is done completely in the dark. Like, it's open to the public, but not many people actually attend and watch. And so I want to make sure that we stream it and that it's available live on Orange TV so that our residents can see what's going on and they can have that confidence. One of the other things that I really want to institute is like a Citizens Academy, where once a quarter or every 6 months on a Saturday, invite the public, those that want to come in and see, and we'll show you from the moment you cast your vote, how it goes all the way through the office's process until it shows up on the Secretary of State's site as an election result, and let people actually see that entire process and learn together. So that's what I really want to do, is to continue. We've got a great bar so far, but I want to raise it to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Grund, we'll go to you next.
Sorry, wrong button. Yes, I think voter confidence and integrity in our election system is imperative, and it's what the voters truly want to see. I'm leading by example. A big part of my platform is not taking any campaign contributions, and that's because my goal and my vision is that the elected officials are not influenced by special interest. And so they know that each and every vote that they make is counted and that the citizens' vote is protected. And so I'm leading from the top in that direction with integrity so that they're confident in who I am and what I bring to the table, and that when they cast their vote, that it is heard. And I do think that a big part of it is educating the electorate. I agree with you, Mr. Hodge, that having citizens engaged in our elections, understanding where we're at, what we're doing, going into the office, being that open door. A lot of people are like, well, what is it? Where does my vote even go? Why does it matter? And I think it's really important letting them see the importance of their vote and how in each and every election, the difference that it makes. We had a 10% turnout in our last, approximately, it was a little under that, in our special election. So I think it's really giving them the confidence that when they cast their vote, that it matters and that it gives them better quality candidates. And so then they'll want to go out and vote. And as far as providing the fail-safe, I agree too that it's ensuring that we, again, have the integrity of the office, that we have the citizens involved in all elements of our election process, and being out there in the community so they know who we are, what we're doing, and how we're there to serve them and nobody but the citizens. And that's how I would do it. I would just, again, lead by example, would want to look at the stakeholders and what are they saying and what makes them feel comfortable and confident in our election process, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to serve the citizens. They're the ones that are electing us. They're the ones that are electing each and every elected official. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Castor Dentel, you next. Sorry.
Thank you, Jay. This is very important. Perception is everything. You have to, it's not just whether we operate the office efficiently and effectively and transparently, but the people in the county have to believe that we are above board, that we are making those decisions, and that there is a level of trust. And I bring that trust as a elected official who has been accountable to voters. This is my 8th year of being an elected official, and I have operated with that transparency. I have, you can go look at my voting record. You can look at YouTube's where I'm speaking. So there's a lot of a history of what I have done, and you can project of what I will do. I think it's important that this office is not seen as partisan or hyper-partisan. I bring my values to the job, but my role has always been to serve the public at large. And I've had conversations with people who are concerned that this office could be politicized. And that is a major threat to the integrity of the office. I am, as a candidate, I'm not making any endorsements for other candidates. I'm not making any contributions to other candidates because I don't want anyone to think that I might have my thumb on the scale. So again, I think it's important to have an audit as soon as you enter the office and just really look at what are the contracts. And I've already talked with our comptroller, Phil Diamond, and he's ready to do that on day one. And also just look at how we're spending the dollars, and is it meeting the needs of the voters? Again, just operating with transparency and my own integrity, I think will help the perception that we're working for the benefit of all people in our district.
Thank you for that. Mr. Helm, same question.
So the question is about the integrity of the process, that the perception that the process is fair and balanced. And we've come a long way from Bush v. Gore. I was about 15 years old when Bush v. Gore, not to age myself here, but when Bush v. Gore happened, and Florida was was mocked because of how poorly we ran elections. And Florida did something unique then. We revitalized the election code. We thought about it. We were creative and thoughtful and purposeful about how we implemented rules that we would never be laughed at again in the country because of how poorly we ran that election. And so we've gone a long way from hanging chads and touchscreens. We now use paper ballots. And one thing that is part of my initiative is I want to take our machines that are called DS300s, DS950s. That DS in front of the term stands for digital scan. What the machine is actually doing, it's taking a paper ballot and scanning it in, and it creates an image, and it does image adjudication on that ballot. One thing I want to implement is using those ballot images. I think if I look at what the law states and the retention of documents, then the Florida Division of Library Information, the GS3 schedule, item number 168, if we're being specific, says that we should be retaining ballot images that are cast on these machines. And so that's one way I can say to any voter, hey, you don't trust Dan Helm doing the election? Let me give you 100% of the ballot images and you conduct your own audit. Because right now we have a process that's fair and balanced through the election code. We also do our own audit. We use a system called Clear Ballot. Through my persistent agitation, starting since March, I've actually gotten our Orange County Supervisor elections to start saving digital ballot images through the audit system. I think they should be saved when they come through the ES&S system, those digital ballot images. Volusia County is already saving these. Our neighbors are doing it. We should save them in Orange County. It's a fair, transparent way to say the election is fair. Don't trust us. Conduct your own election. Here's all the images.
Some of you talked about the appearance of bias. Many people feel that elections officials have a duty to reach out to qualified voters and in demographic groups that underperform in terms of voter registration and turnout. But others say that this is tantamount to putting a thumb on the scales, and that voters bear the majority or sometimes the sole responsibility for making sure that they are registered and voting, with nonprofits and political parties picking up the outreach duties. How do you feel about targeted outreach, and how would your office handle that? And let's start with Dr. Castor Dentel.
So where I stand on that issue is voting laws and procedures are very complex. We do not serve ourselves in a democracy. We don't serve ourselves well by keeping information from people and saying, you're on your own to figure it out. I believe it is the role of the supervisor to give information out to everyone, including those areas where we have voting deserts. And some of the ideas that I've had are to expand the supervisor's locations. We have one in Orange County downtown, and it's a strange little parking lot. It's not very convenient or accessible. So I think we could have some locations in other areas like they have in Hillsborough County. One of the ideas I have is to co-locate some supervisor of elections office with the tax collector, with Scott Randolph. We've had those conversations. There are two of the largest, busiest tax collector offices in the state here in Orlando or in Orange County, at West Oaks Mall and the Lee Vista Center. And they do 80% of voter registration there. So I think it makes sense to also have an office for the supervisor there to answer questions, help people update their addresses, their signatures, get information about when the election is, and make sure they know where their polling place is, make sure they have the right ID. Those are all ways to remove barriers to people voting. That will affect those areas where we have a low voting turnout. Another idea is a vote mobile, a mobile unit to go out into those neighborhoods and be present and have that physical presence and kind of add some enthusiasm for the event. I mean, we can wrap it up with QR codes and let people know we're coming, and then interact with the community and be a source of information and education. And I'm excited about those initiatives.
Ms. Grund, same question. How do you feel about targeted voter outreach?
Oh, I think this is a part of the heart of my candidacy. Is I want the power to go back to the people. And I think a level you could quantify our success in this role with our voter turnout. That was the one thing that I love Bill Cowles, and we went to the same school. I think I might have mentioned this, UCF, and we both studied at the Graduate School of Health and Public Affairs. And so I understand data. And I think we use this, and that is what should drive some of our initiatives. If we're having a low turnout, why are we having that low turnout? How do we implement strategies to support our citizens? As I've been out in the field already, I was by Evans High School. The people were like, I can't believe you're out here just talking to us. People don't come out here and talk to us. That should never be spoken in our community. So I will be to all areas of Orange County. And I want to give them the information. I think Brevard County and Seminole County do a great job of online presence of giving information to their voters on the candidates. You'll know their website, their phone number, that you get the power back to the citizens and they get to make the educated, informed decision. I think that's how we drive. Because a lot of people, sometimes we don't have voter turnout because they're like, I don't know anything about these people. Also, they don't look like me. They don't talk like me. Are they really going to represent me? And that's where we get the apathy. So I absolutely would want to do targeted outreach. Some of our partners, the Democratic executive committee was making phone calls out to just get out the vote and make sure that you know that your voter registration has been canceled if you didn't renew it. And someone literally was upset with me. I've shared this before. They were like, why did you do this to me? And I was like, I didn't do this. This is the legislator. I'm calling you as a citizen. And I would do this as the supervisor to make sure that you know what needs to be done so that your vote and your voice can be heard. So it's also knowing what the issues are for the citizens to get that turnout, because that is a reflection of what we're doing to actively engage and empower our citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Helm, same question.
Yes, so I think that for some reason it's become controversial to do voter registration and voter engagement, voter outreach. It shouldn't be, right? We should all want people to be registered to vote, to participate in this great idea of democracy. I talk a lot about my favorite part of the election code does not come from the normal place that you'd think, 97 through 106. It comes from the flag code. It comes from 256.11, which requires that on election day, we display the flag, because that's what it's about. It's about us coming together and fulfilling the promise of America and voting. And so when I look at sort of the passage of bills that undercut, particularly when I think about voter registration, and the way that there's been huge penalties and fines placed on third-party voter registration services, it's a problem that is the case. The carve out, though, that I see that this role as supervisor elections can make is that the supervisor elections is not part of those fines. There's a carve out that the supervisor elections is exempt from any of those things, because the job of the supervisor elections is to go out and register voters. And so I want to tell community and groups that are doing voter registration, hey, if you're going to do a voter registration, I will have a deputy from my office, so you don't have to worry about collecting those paper forms and be eligible for fines. I'll do that for you. I'll just be there to make sure that you can do the voter registration that you want to do. And I'll do it in a nonpartisan manner. Anybody that wants to do voter registration will have the full support of the Supervisor Elections Office to make sure I'll have people there to support that initiative, because it should be easy for people to get registered to vote, to update their information. That's also about having good use of technology, modernizing the website, having a great call center. The nicest thing about the Supervisor Elections Office is you can call in and you can talk to a human right away to update your information. That needs to be told in a broad way. You know, in terms of community outreach, another thing I talk about is being Dan the voting man. I'm so passionate about this work. I want to be in front of all types of media. I want to be there to tell people, hey, there's an election coming up. You can count on Dan to know that you can get registered and get out to vote.
Mr. Hodge.
Thank you. I need to make a correction because the clear voting audit system has been in place for over a year at the Supervisor of Elections office. And I was at the canvassing board meeting in September of last year when the canvassing board voted to use it for the Orlando election in November. So that software has been in the office for some time and has been used for the purpose of auditing. So I just needed to make sure that that was clear because it wasn't done in March of this year. To answer your question, the Supervisor of Elections should be the biggest cheerleader for voting in our community. I think that it's the duty of the Supervisor of Elections to drive turnout as high as possible, because we have a fiduciary responsibility to our taxpayers to get turnout as high as possible, because guess what? We pay basically the same fixed cost for elections, whether it's 8% turnout or 80% turnout. So why don't we challenge the staff and challenge our community to increase voter turnout as high as possible? Because that's the best return on investment for our taxpayers. And that's something that really needs to be addressed. As far as how to continue to engage our outreach, I don't want to do targeted outreach. I think that that kind of opens yourself up. But what I do want to do is partner with different groups and organizations. So lodges, fraternities and sororities, you know, doing outreach with the colleges, making sure that we have engagement there. The supervisor's office currently has 4 funded outreach positions. Only 2 of those positions are filled. Mr. Gilzine put a budget request for 2 additional outreach positions. But currently there's no outreach person that speaks Haitian Creole or Portuguese or Vietnamese, which is a huge component of our community. And I want to make sure that we have culturally competent engagement. And so that's one of the biggest things. The other thing I want to do is empower a youth advisory board or council so that they can advise, our outreach team on how to engage our younger voters, because I think that there's a great opportunity there as well. Thank you.
I'll ask the next question. Do you believe the state is using reliable information to identify and purge inactive or unqualified voters now that it has dropped out of the Electronic Registration Information Center, or ERIC? As supervisor, what would you do about this? And we will start with Ms. Grund.
So I think the importance of our data is imperative as we supervise our elections, so that, again, the citizens know that they can show up to the polls and they can make their vote, because the quality of our rolls are based off of the information provided to our office. And so I do believe and hope that it's reliable, and I would work on the reliability. That's a part of my vision of being more collaborative with the candidates as they're out with the voters, just because if they get information that rolls back into our office, we could use that to reach out and see if we need to update our system. So it's really using all aspects of our engagement within the community, whether that's directly or indirectly. As far as data moving forward, again, I think I would just support our community and having accurate information. Again, I think that goes back to going to the citizens directly and reaching them. And if information does show up, finding out where there was the unreliability in the process.
Thank you for that. Mr. Helm, same question.
So the question behind the question is Eagle Eye, right? It's Eagle AI, whether we're using the best tools available to make sure that we are doing the work required for the supervisor elections, that all the voters on the rolls are supposed to be there. And so I think if I could independently rejoin ERIC, I certainly would. I think ERIC was a great tool. For some reason, for political reasons, I believe, we removed ourselves from the ERIC system that allowed us to make sure that people from other states weren't voting twice, right? It was a great way to deter voter fraud. I'm the only candidate here that has actually called out voter fraud. I called out Derek Chauvin, the man who murdered George Floyd. In Orange County in 2020, I called him out because he voted in 2016 and 2018 illegally here in Orange County. That's a violation of our election code. He was living in Minnesota. That's where his home was. That's where he claimed residency. And so that's voter fraud, right? So that's how you deter voter fraud. You call it out. There's not large, wide-scale voter fraud. I think that if you look at the numbers, the percentage of actual voter fraud is very small, but when we see it, we need to call it out. And so making sure that we're purging people from the rolls is appropriate. I'll tell you, the law requires that up to 90 days, right? So 90 days before a federal election, all sort of purging activities are to cease. And so I do have some concerns that we are currently continuing to purge. There are circumstances where we're allowed to purge based on somebody's incarceration or otherwise adjudication of mental status or otherwise, that they'd be not eligible to vote. But a lot of our purge technique should end 90 days before the election. Additionally, the legislature has also changed the law here. We used to do purge activities only on off years, right? So on odd number years, the legislature's changed this to make purge activities every year. So it's a constant task that the supervisor elections is going to have to undertake to make sure there are registered rolls. And the flip side of that is to make sure that we're educating, getting the information to voters that, hey, they're now on inactive status. You need to re-update your information. Otherwise, you will be purged from the rolls, as well as we're doing voter registration to get these people back on the rolls. We've grown in population. We should always see voter registration go up. We should never see it really go down because of purge activities. And so balancing those two interests, making sure that the rolls are as accurate as possible, but also making sure that we're doing people to make sure they're eligible to vote and it had their voice heard.
Thank you for that. Dr. Castor Dentel, same question.
So you are asking if we believe the information about our voter registration list that we get is reliable. I can only go with what is given. So I have another concern is if it's not exactly up to date. So there is a process, there are laws that dictate how we go through that list maintenance. And some people might see it as a voting purge, but we definitely could do much better. Right now we get, or the supervisor's office gets information from the Department of Health for people who have been deceased. We have information from the clerk of court about people who have been convicted of a felon. So those areas, we do get that information, even though that Florida has pulled out of that ERIC system where we communicate, like Dan Helm mentioned. So then it's up to the supervisor to really make a extra effort to maintain updated lists. So one of the ways that they have been removing people from the list is identifying your voting history if you haven't voted in a couple of cycles. But then they put your name on the website and say, these people are going to be purged this month unless you contact us. And how are people supposed to know that? It's being left up to community groups or political parties to scan those lists and then go contact their members. And that's really not a service. So it's important that the supervisor is the one reaching out we have phone numbers, we have emails. We don't just have to rely on a postcard that we send out. I know that people, when they request their vote by mail ballot, that is one way to maintain their name on our voter registration list. But it is important for the supervisor to maintain the accuracy of our list and keep them up to date and use those other agencies that provide that vital information.
Thank you. Mr. Hodge?
Thank you. So one of the biggest things, when you're elected supervisor of elections, you join the Association of Florida Supervisor of Elections, and they have a government affairs portion of it. And I would love to be a part of that to advocate for rejoining ERIC. I think that ERIC is a great, piece of software that allows us to double check and verify across the country as to, preventing people from registering to vote in multiple locations. Dr. Castor Dentel was correct. We do get information from clerk of courts, not only for felony convictions, but also people who have been adjudicated mentally incompetent and had their voting rights taken away. We've got to make sure that when we do these voter purges, we do them and then we let the people know. One of the things that I have proposed is gathering the region's supervisor of elections, so Lake, Brevard, Osceola, Seminole, and Volusia, coming together using tools like the Orlando Sentinel to say, listen, we've just purged our voter rolls as we're legally required to. Please go to our websites and verify if your name is on that list. And if your name is on that list, you need to call our office immediately. I think we've done a really poor job of communicating that to our people. I've worked with Senators Thompson and Yarborough and Rep. Bracy Davis to really try to work to enhance the election laws to make them, easier and more friendly for supervisors of elections to communicate to the public about what's going on. But there's just not a whole lot of appetite in Tallahassee for that right now. But I want to continue to push for that because it's necessary changes. The other thing that I really want to do is partner with the clerk of courts. When we have returning citizens, they can't get information about if they're eligible to register to vote or not. And so I would like, since the state's refusing to create a database, get with the clerk of courts, create a database, at least here in Orange County, so that former felons or returning citizens can see if they're eligible to vote and hopefully expand that across the state.
Thank you for that. Next question. I know you're all Democrats, but this is really a threat assessment rather than a partisan question. There are only a few counties left in Florida that are seen as Democratic strongholds, and Orange is one of them. Do you fear that opens Orange County to tampering or intimidation attempts? What form might those take, and what would you do about it? We'll start with Mr. Helm.
Yeah, so one thing that I do that makes me unique among the candidates for supervisor elections is I've actually been election worker. I've actually have election administration experience, the only candidate to collect a paycheck from the supervisor elections office. Oftentimes I serve in that role as the poll deputy. So when I'm working election, I'm the person outside. And I'll tell you why I do that work. In part because when I was regional deputy director of voter protection, I trained hundreds of lawyers and volunteers in election law and got them assigned to the polls, similar to what the supervisor election does in Central Florida. I was in charge of 13 different counties. I got to see how important this one role was to protect the voters within their county, to make sure they were not instances of voter intimidation and voter suppression, that there was information to make sure that people could participate in the process. And on election day in 2016, things slowed down in the afternoon, and I asked if I could actually go do my job as a poll watcher, be at the polls as a poll watcher, like I had trained all these people. And what scared me in 2016 was an instance of voter intimidation and voter suppression. When I was working the poll and I, made sure that voters were aware of their right to vote a provisional ballot, they had 0 when I arrived. By the time I left, they had 15 provisional ballots. So it's extra work for the county canvassing board, but also your right as a voter to vote, cast a provisional ballot that not many people are aware of. But what scared me was 2 motorcycle white police officers showed up to the precinct that I was at. It was an 85% black precinct. I was there to make sure that I was protecting the vote. The 2 white police officers were not assigned there. They just showed up there with their arms crossed in front of the door. And it's one thing to be a student of history and understand Jim Crow. It's another thing to see it in 2016, right? And so I had the audacity and permission of the clerk to go outside and tell those officers, you can't do this. You can't be here intimidating voters. This is illegal under our statute 102.11. You need to leave. And they did. So I protected the vote. I'm an advocate for protecting the vote from voter suppression. That's why I'm running.
Thank you for that. Mr. Hodge, same question.
Thank you, Julie. So as the party chair in my 6 years, I assigned thousands of poll watchers to precincts across the county during voting, and was essential in making sure that this didn't happen. Voter intimidation didn't happen. And by and large, we did not have many instances of that, which is good, right? But we're in a different environment now. And so one of the things that really concerns me is that we are adequately adjusting to the threat assessment that's there. Supervisor Cowles did a good job about 2 years ago, I believe. They overhauled and remodeled the Supervisor of Elections office. They hardened it. You had to have I had to have a badge to get in. There's doors. There's certain levels of security enhancements that have been done. So from that perspective, I was happy to see that. I want to take it a step further, especially with our people who are staff that's opening vote by mail. We need to make sure that they have PPE, because we have now started to see instances of white powdery substances showing up in vote by mail envelopes. And so I want to make sure that people opening envelopes have PPE, they're in a well-ventilated area, and we have Narcan available if necessary. Fortunately, the Supervisor of Elections office is literally down the street from our level 1 trauma center. So God forbid anything happens, the hospital's right there. But I want to take those proactive steps to protect our staff. I also want to make sure that we're working with the sheriff and our chiefs of police to assess any threats or, potential security issues that might affect the impending election, but also to coordinate transit of the ballots, not only on election day, but also during early voting when they leave those remote sites to come back to the Supervisor of Elections office, so they're not tampered with, harassed, or interfered with in any way. So yes, this is very much something that I've been thinking about for quite some time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grund. I'm sorry, Ms. Grund.
Yes, thank you. This is again at the core of my candidacy and the heart of this campaign. Orange County should be a stronghold in democracy. I absolutely agree with you. And I think how we get there is we do it by being the best. And so we do it by protecting each and every citizen to allow their vote and their voice to be heard. I have a goal to create an environment of inclusiveness to foster equal elections so that if we're staying democratic, it's because we have amazing candidates and the citizens are showing up. And so a lot of times there's partisan politics of, I support this person or that person. And I would like to roll out a program where we get voter turnout by each citizen taking ownership of getting their community involved. And they could put out a sign about a month before the election, or it would be red. It would say, your candidates are qualified. Let's get out the vote. You're not being partisan. You're just trying to get the vote out. White would be when early voting starts. So in this case, just so the citizens are aware, it's the 5th to the 18th of August from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Make sure you get out there and vote. We have 22 locations. And then blue would be the week of, and that's just, hey, election day is coming up. Make sure you get to the polls. So it's, again, just fostering that community. And that's how you protect democracy, because we're engaged, the powers to the people. Someone recently asked, what if you get a call like in Georgia, they need to find 20,000 votes. And I honestly could not fathom that question, because I don't even understand it, because they would know they couldn't call me. Like, my vote and my voice is not for sale. Whoever and whatever the citizens decide to vote or not vote for will be the decision that I stand firm on. They can trust me. They can trust this office, not on partisan, not on my position, because it's not about me. It's about the citizens and what they want. And so that's how we protect democracy, because the people can trust the system from the top down, from this office and every other elected office. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Castor Dentel, you want to finish this up?
Sure. And I appreciate that question about keeping our elections safe. So it's not just because we're a Democratic stronghold that we're a threat, just that we're having an election in general, I think exposes us to some random acts or coordinated acts. So being a member of the school board, I have had a lot of experience with how do we protect students and teachers. We have so many layers of sophisticated security that we can benefit from my experience when we're looking at how do we keep not just the supervisor's office safe, but the voters when they're going to vote at our early voting locations or on election day. So I think it would be important, since I'm not the expert on law enforcement, and that this is a rising concern. I have spoken to poll workers who have said, I'm not going to do it this year. I'm not going to put myself in harm's way. That's a concern. So I would appoint a director of safety and security, and that person would be in touch with our law enforcement officials. They would be responsible for reviewing all of our polling locations and determining a threat assessment. They would determine an emergency plan for each polling location. They would also train our poll workers so that they are confident in what to do in an emergency situation. We could, whether it's de-escalation training with someone who doesn't seem safe, or from an outside security threat. And each polling location would have a point person so that they would know who to go to when there is an issue, or if they see something, that there is a coordinated plan already in the works to respond. And I think that's an important role that we could add to the office.
Thank you for that. Wanted to ask about spending, and I know that vote tabulation equipment was brought up earlier, and I wanted to ask all of you if there were any additional technical improvements needed there. But more broadly, what other additional spending would you recommend to the county commission if you end up in charge of the office? Where your priorities stand on that? And Dr. Castor Dentel, we will start with you.
So I would have to review the budget first and see where, if we're being effective in our role, and then decide if our budget is fitting those needs. But as far as other things I would like to really focus on is, are we communicating? We're not. I mean, we're not doing enough. So what can we do better? What would that cost? I know it would cost more in just hiring additional personnel, experts. I mean, creating a communications team. I think we need to do a much better job at community outreach and having those credible messengers out in the community, so that we're not just delivering information, but that we're having those conversations. And that would be like an ambassador role that we could expand. There would be a cost for those satellite locations, but if we're able to co-locate them with other county offices, that would be a reasonable increase. A vote mobile could be an additional cost, but I know that Hillsborough County was able to do something similar with a vote van, where they got a donated van from a car dealer, and then they partnered with the League of Women Voters, and they had that wrapped with the community, with QR codes, and they had a grant for that. And then they communicated with Spectrum to make sure that people knew when and where the vote mobile would be. So those, again, are not expensive if you have that kind of community partnership. As far as getting out with other community groups, we could expand our partnership with League of Women Voters, our different sororities, the AKAs, our Delta Sigma Thetas, Rotary clubs. There are so many groups that want to help expand. And I would continue our partnership with the Orange County Public Schools to help educate our students and help get them registered to vote, like I have this last month of school.
Thank you for that. Mr. Helm, same question.
So one thing Bill was impressive on, Bill Cowles, is that he was a great steward of our fiscal responsibility and that the office's dollars. He was such a great steward that he'd always end up returning money to the county commission of money that he had unspent. And sometimes I was like, can't we just spend some of that money on community outreach, fill those positions that are vacant, or can't we do a lift for social? So I think that I have a background of experience that I would also increase our grant. There's a lot of money since 2020, particularly after the impact of COVID did to the election system, that there's a lot of actual money out there to provide grants for people that are trying to do community engagement, for people that are trying to do innovative ideas. And so I think that I could reach out for those grants that wouldn't put a burden on the county commission to approve a budget. One aspect that I did as getting prepared for this role is I actually public records request the budget for the past 5 years. My background in corporate America, seeing this role as administrative, right? I'm going to have a staff of around 55 to 60 people. I'm going to have a budget that fluctuates from 15 million to up to like 22 million on a major general election year. And understanding where that money is going is very important to the administration of this role. That's a key component that the supervisor elections goes in front of the county commission and says, this is what I need the money for. I've done the homework on that. One aspect that concerns me in the budget is that one of the largest expenditures is getting ready for the election and recruiting the staff needed for all those early voting locations, all those precincts. I've done that work. I know what it incurs in terms of the training. Right now, we're using a lot of temp agencies to fill the staffing needs, and they charge a 30% premium over normal recruitment. So if I can be a better steward of dollars, it includes going and recruiting people on college campuses and otherwhere to be poll workers so that we don't have that extra cost.
Thank you. And Mr. Hodge, same question.
Thank you. So I'm very familiar because here's the budget. I'm the only candidate that actually went to the budget hearings for the county a couple of weeks ago and actually spoke on behalf of the Supervisor of Elections budget. I've worked for 2 county commissioners. I've been involved in 2 budget cycles with the county. The county has currently a $6.9 billion budget. And, before I ran, I also requested the last 5 years of the SOE's budget, but I also sat down with Kurt Peterson, who's the budget and finance director for the county. And then I sat down with Supervisor Cowles and went over the numbers and had long discussions about these things. Where do I think we can continue to improve tech? The county has something called express voting machines, and those are the touch screen machines that have a thermal heat transfer that prints out a ballot. And we primarily use them for persons who are ADA or have an ADA request for persons with voters with disabilities. But the great thing about those machines is that there's language licenses available, and we have the Spanish language license. And so when I talk about increasing language accessibility, I would love to offer that touchscreen in Portuguese, Haitian Creole, and Vietnamese, in addition to English and Spanish, so that we can increase language access. We already have over 200 of these machines. I'd like to get some more so that we don't just have one per precinct on election day. But this is a great opportunity to expand language access for our voters. And the overall budget this year is $19.1 million. The budget's very cyclical. It's weird. You have to compare in 4-year blocks. And so 4 years ago, the budget was $14.1 million. And so this constitutes a 35% increase. I am concerned about where some of those increases are. I've already kind of talked about the need for oversight and accountability. That's one of the things I really want to do. I want to make sure our staff is paid well, and they are very well paid. They've received incremental bonuses. They've received the same year over supplements and salary increases as the non-bargaining workers. But I want to make sure the overhead is good. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Grund, over to you.
Yes, thank you. This is, again, an area that I get to shine in with my background, studying budget management consulting with nonprofits that serve our community. That's what we're doing in this role. And as the other candidates have said, I've reviewed the budget. Where are we spending the budget? Right now it's in workshop. Once that gets approved, we will move forward with that budget and then evaluating, I think, our priorities. Some of the priorities would be on communications, making sure that the voters, again, know where to go, know what to do. When I was out with special elections, they didn't know when the election was, that there was a special election. So I think it's just being the boots on the ground so that the citizens truly are engaged, and that will reflect our returns on investment. Also being active in the high schools, that would be a priority, I think, for those graduating. And I think Bill Cowles, again, did a great job with that and getting that culture in our community. And, as a candidate, in previous elections, my return on investment has been drastically disproportionate because I pay the qualification fee, and then I let the voters speak. And so my return on investment was, say, $5 to their $30, the incumbent, and the money that they spent. And then it was like maybe $3 to $17, and it's going down. And my dream is that the return on investment is the citizens are making that decision. And I think we do that by investing in what's working to get the voters out. And then it doesn't matter who's trying to buy the vote of the people or influence them one way or the other, but the citizens get to decide. And so when we spend our money focused on the citizens and making sure that they are engaged, that they're active in their community, and they're letting their vote and their voice be heard, we know that our budget is operating appropriately. And if it's not, again, we do that data analysis. What can we do better? How can we meet these benchmarks? And that's a step-by-step process. And I've been in the government governing board of CBC. We were CBC of Seminole. We moved to CBC of Central Florida. So I've been in that capacity as well. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to make a wrap-up argument as to why you should be the choice for the Democrats in this race. But first, I wanted to let our readers know we are proceeding as if this race will be on the August ballot, and we will be making an endorsement in this race. But each of these candidates has done a lot to make sure that you have good information about them. We also are going to have our excellent news coverage, as always, of this race. So don't rely just on what we say in our editorial, but look beyond there and look for a candidate who really represents your your priorities and interests in this race. Obviously, this is an incredibly important choice, and we hope that our readers make it with a lot of research and engagement. And what I will do now is, before we started, I used a randomizer to pick the final order of people to do their closing statements. And so I would ask, starting with Ms. Grund, to give us a pitch as to why you should be the choice for the election supervisor.
Great. Thank you. It's been an honor and literally a privilege to share with you today as a qualified candidate for your next supervisor of elections. It's not about me, though. It's about the future of our community. With that said, I'm going to share about 2 individuals I've met along the campaign trail. Might I say what a blessing it is to engage with so many citizens along the journey and talk politics. It's almost surreal sometimes because I love it. Most people cringe. I love it. So the first person I'm going to talk about is someone I met at a political function. This is important because it highlights that they are involved. They were our professionals in our community, and they were there networking as they build their business. At one point in our conversation, the discussion was about money and politics, to which I asked if they knew how much it cost to be on the ballot, to which they looked at me inquisitive, and I jokingly said, "What do you think, $1?" If you could see the hope and spark in their eyes, it was beautiful. Then I told them the actual number, and that is $11,605.14. And I'm sure you can imagine witnessing that fade in their eyes. Fast forward to the following week when I submitted a check in that amount as an investor in our democracy. The next person is the person who stood next to me withdrawing from their campaign. The person had served decades as a police officer in our community. However, because he didn't have the money or access to it, he would not be able to qualify. He was not given the opportunity to serve as a candidate. When I tell you the tears in my eyes were real, I mean it. I truly saw him, and our community deserves better. Now, I love my sheriff, and I am not here to tell you who the best candidate would be. That's your decision. What I am here to say is that we need to fix our system so each and every person who is willing and able to serve is given equal opportunities. The person had a darker skin color, both of them actually, but I promise they deserve a seat at our tables. Martin Luther King had a dream that our 4 children would not be judged, his 4 children, by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. I have a dream where our candidates are not judged or beholden by the content of their campaign accounts, but the merit in their candidacy. SunshineGrund.com. I look forward to working together to making our office the best and the brightest in our state and in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hodge, you're up next.
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. There's been one candidate here today who's answered every question directly, confidently, and that's because I have the experience working in this field for the last decade. It's not just a fluke that I'm running for this. I've been working in this space, and when Supervisor Cowles announced his retirement, our elected officials and community leaders came to me and said, "We want you to be in this position because it's a natural fit." And so, I had been looking at this position for a while, and I agreed. And so we put together a plan, and here we are. I want to see us with more early voting sites. I want to implement an early voting appointment system similar to the tax collector's office. When you go to renew your tag, you make an appointment. No matter how long that line is, you go straight to the front. And so my hope is we get more people voting because parents with children, seniors standing in August heat, or people that have to work a job don't have the luxury of standing in line for an hour and a half or 2 hours, which is what happens at Alafaya, for example, on a regular basis. I also want to increase language access. We have a beautiful, diverse community, but we only offer ballots in English and Spanish. We have the technology to offer that information in English, Spanish, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, and Vietnamese, and I'm committed to do that. I also want to make sure day one, we have an audit of all of our early voting sites and our precincts for ADA accessibility. So if you have visual or auditory or mobility issues, you can get to a polling site. It's also important for me to make sure that every single precinct is on a bus line, which is not currently the case. I want to increase our community engagement, and I want to encourage our returning citizens to have the knowledge that they know that they can safely register to vote and be empowered to have their voice returned. It's important to me to have the support of my community. I'm proud to be endorsed by groups like the Florida Democratic Disability Caucus, the LGBTQ Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, the Progressive Caucus. This it means a lot to me to have the support of my community. Even the Florida Now PAC has endorsed me. But there's also an opportunity with my candidacy to make history. When I'm elected, I will be Florida's first and the nation's only openly LGBTQ supervisor of elections. So go to weshodgeoc.com and let's make history.
Thank you. Dr. Castor Dentel.
All right, thank you. So for the people who are watching or tuning in and are interested, I appreciate your time. And I appreciate your the board's time for allowing this today. I am running essentially just to defend democracy. I want to expand access. I see that that is a great need. I want to increase turnout. Our turnout is really a reflection of so many things that are wrong right now, and I'd like to improve those. I want to safeguard our elections process. First, by expanding access, I want to make our early voting sites more accessible, increase those numbers in areas where they are needed. I want to establish those satellite offices for convenient access to the supervisor, where they can update addresses, their signatures, ask questions, register, enroll and vote by mail, or drop off their ballot, find their polling place. There is such a need just to understand those basics of how the elections work. And I would like to start the mobile unit, the Vote Mobile, to target voting deserts, visit senior centers, and attend parades. You can see it going down the parade route with a QR code and people sitting there and updating the registration as the Vote Mobile goes through. And then just kind of increase enthusiasm for elections. I think we have that ability. I want to increase turnout through communications and outreach. Knowledge is power. I want to inform voters about how the changes in election laws affect them directly. And I want to invest in voter education like I have in our schools. And I want to safeguard our elections. My experience with elections spans decades. From when I was a little girl, my mother first ran for office when I was only 5. I've been a grassroots organizer. I've done voter registration, poll watching. I was a candidate myself. I have organizational leadership, and I have the support of so many other people like the AFL-CIO and SEIU unions of working people. And I have the support of Mayor Buddy Dyer and Commissioner Kari Burns and Senator Torres. You can see more at my website at karenforsupervisor.com. Thank you for your attention, and I would love to have your support.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Helm, you want to wrap us up?
I'd love to. So my name is Dan Helm. I'm running for Orange County Supervisor elections. I'm seeking the paper's endorsement because I'm the most qualified candidate for this office. I'm running to continue the institution that was Bill Cow's, right? The nonpartisan, efficient administrator of elections for nearly 30 years. That's almost my whole lifetime, right? I'm the youngest candidate, but I'm also the candidate with the most experience in election administration. Not just elections. You know, I've worked on campaigns. I've worked behind the scenes for elections. But in election administration, I'm the only candidate that's collected a paycheck from the Supervisor Elections Office. I'm the only candidate that's a former Democratic nominee for the Supervisor Elections Office. I have the expert level knowledge of the election code. I have a passion for this job. My friends know me as Dan the Voting Man. I'm a lawyer. I'm a voting rights advocate. You know, from my work with voter protection in 2016, 8 years ago, I saw the way that good supervisors can interact with the electorate and what bad supervisors were doing. And I saw how we can make it better. Bill Cowles was the model. Orange County was the model of efficient administration of elections. I want to continue that work. I'm the only candidate that's worked with and trained with the staff because I've been an election administrator. I'm the only candidate that's done that. There's been 5 elections this past year. Any one of our fellow candidates could have been a poll worker, could have been seeing the inside of what it looks like. So I'm the only one that's done that experience. I think it's an important insight to have to be able to run the office efficiently. From my work, when I sued the Supervisor Elections Office, they were violating the law in 2018. I made sure that we weren't disenfranchising voters. Voters that should have been allowed to vote were not being turned away from the polls. I filed a lawsuit and I won. I protected the voters in Orange County. In 2020, I called out voter fraud. The man who murdered George Floyd, Derek Chauvin by name, was committing voter fraud. He was voting illegally in Orange County while he was living in Minnesota. I've been doing this work a long time because it's my passion. This is what I love. It's the only job that I'd want in government because I think it's important who has your vote. And I've said repeatedly, Dan, the voting man, I want to be your supervisor elections. My website is votedanhelm.com. I appreciate your endorsement and your support.
Thank you all so much. I think it's very clear that voters have some fantastic choices in this race, and we wish you all the best of luck.